I want to bring up one of the best speakers, activists, someone about whom I could tell endless stories and whom I've just learned rescued one of our guests here this evening from a blizzard as he was crossing some border into China from some country I've never heard of, and who has been absolutely everywhere, who is going to be in D.C. tomorrow morning as part of a congressional hearing and an event we can't mention until after it happens, and then in Stanton tomorrow evening for another event. She never, ever, ever stops. Please welcome Ann Wright.
And thank you all for, for being here in Charlottesville, Virginia. It's been a long time since I've been here. Last time was our dear friend Cindy Sheehan, and back in 2006. And it was a great event, and it's always great to be back here. David is one of the people also that never stops working, and if you happen to be in email contact with him, 24 hours a day, he is at a computer. It sure seems that way, because it doesn't matter when you mail something, email it to him, an article, something you've seen. If you're on the West Coast, if you're in Hawaii, it doesn't really matter. There's a response that comes back. And that website, After Downing Street, is one of the most critical ones that we have, because it tells you what's going on every single day of the year. Not only about what's happening that we know from the commercial media is going on, but what's going on behind the scenes, and where people are and what they're doing and what they have done, where they've gotten arrested, where they've gone to jail, where they have stood up in congressional hearings, and you read about it in After Downing Street. So David and I were just, last weekend, we were up in Andover, Massachusetts for a very, very interesting event. It was called the, the Prosecution of American War Criminals. Now, how about that for a title for a conference? The Prosecution of American War Criminals. Now, who do you think they were? Who are we talking about here? I mean, we're talking about the people that have been in the leadership positions of our country for the last 7.5 years, who have led us into illegal wars, who have tortured people, who have eavesdropped on us, who have sold our country down the tubes on so many things. Just now, you know, today, what, $700 billion that we're now talking about to bail out yet one more set of billionaires. Well, we were in Andover, Massachusetts at the Massachusetts School of Law. Now, that's pretty good. You know, normally, prosecution of American war criminals, well, that would be at the Peace and Justice Center of this, that, or place, you know. No, this was at a law school. And we had critical people, critical thinkers who have been talking about the issues of impeachment, of now indictments is really what we're looking at, because it doesn't appear that this littly-livered Congress, this Congress we elected in 2006, is going to do anything about accountability of those things, of war crimes, of torture, of eavesdropping, of law-breaking. So the next phase is what's called taking the criminals to court, and as civilians, as back in the civilian community, they can be hauled up before district courts. County level, state level, federal level. So the point is, try to find somebody, some prosecutor that will bring these charges against them. And indeed, at that workshop last weekend, we had a woman who said, I'm from the state of Vermont, I'm an attorney, and I'm going to run for Attorney General of the state of Vermont, and my platform is that I will indict George Bush and Dick Cheney on war crimes. Charlotte Dennett, and you can find her website through David's After Downing Street, and she is running for Attorney General. You can do the same thing right here. All you have to do is find a good prosecutor, district or county level or state level, and the charges are there. I mean, we had with us Vincent Bugliosi, who's written The Prosecution of the President for Murder. Now, isn't that a title of a book? Yeah. So we're trying to get accountability, and we need some legal help on this. The indictments really have already been written. They are there in Bugliosi's book. Now we just need people of courage, people to stand up and go to those courts to do it. So that was a remarkable weekend. And the previous weekend, I was with Pat and Sandy in St. Paul, Minnesota, at the Republican National Convention. We were not delegates. I'm sure you're a little surprised to find that out. No, we were not delegates. We were there as the street heat, as thousands, tens of thousands of men and women from all over our country went into St. Paul and to Minneapolis to say to the Republicans, as we had done the previous week in Denver to the Democrats, to say, we don't like what your projects are, what your platforms are, that you all are warmongers. I mean, it really doesn't matter whether you're looking at Obama or McCain. Actually, it does. But on some issues, we've got to hold some people accountable, to include Obama and definitely McCain. On this issue of war, I mean, we've got war going on. War on two fronts, and perhaps on a third if these petitions on preventing a war in Iran don't work. But if, you know, it has been people over the last 3 years have been signing petitions, who have been taking them to Washington. I think David and I were there, what was it, 2 years ago, and we dumped something like 40,000 signatures over the front fence of the White House. Dumped them over because no one would take them. We went knocking at the door. Knock, knock, knock. Walk right up there, you know. Excuse me, Mr. Secret Service, we have some petitions to the President of the United States saying we, the people, don't want a war in Iran. And the Secret Service people said, oh, I'm sorry, we don't take boxes here. You have to mail them in. We said, well, we're here. We're the delegation. We got them. Look at them. Here they are. Here they are. Here they are. No, we can't take them. So when you're right there, what do? You don't go marching down to the post office and put a lick of stamp and put it on. You just take it to the fence and you start dumping it over and dumping it over and dumping it over. And, well, I hope those custodians, those yard cleaners did put them all back together and take them down to the National Archives so that they will be there. Do you think they will? No, probably not. But that's one of the reasons why actually you do need to mail a second set into the White House, because if you go to the archives right now, and I did it with some friends last week because it was Constitution Day last week on Wednesday, so we went to the archives where the U.S. Constitution is housed. That's where it is. And we went there and we had a ceremony on the steps of the archives to say happy birthday to our Constitution, what's left of it. And we sang happy birthday to it, and the guards came out. Well, what are you doing here? We said, well, we're singing happy birthday to our Constitution. Well, you can't do that here. I said, well, why not? It is where it lives. Well, you can't do that on the front steps of the archives. And so we went downstairs and into the Grand Rotunda, and we sang happy birthday there and got kicked out. But they didn't even know it was the Constitution Day in the archives. Nobody seemed to know that at all. But while we were down there, before we actually got kicked out, we were going through all the exhibits. And lo and behold, there was, in a huge, huge case, there was a letter from, I think it was like 1870 something or other, from a group of Americans who were petitioning whatever administration it was at the time to please don't go to war. Don't go to war. Well, does that kind of indicate we've got a little problem in our history? You know, do we have a history of being warmongers? Yes. Yeah, we seem to, and that's why we were all up at St. Paul, Minnesota, and we were in Denver before that to say to these two candidates that are going to be running for the highest office in our land that we'd like to have a little change, thank you very much. We would like to change, both of them seem to be using that term, change. Vote for me for change. Well, the change I want to see out of both of them is let's stop this war stuff. Let's stop being a warmongering country and let's get a little bit of sanity back. Because if we're not sane on this thing, who else is going to say, well, the United States of America, they're invading and occupying everybody else. I mean, why can't we? And indeed, it'll just keep perpetuating itself until we set our feet down on this. But as a part of putting our feet down to the government to say we don't want this to happen, guess what happens when you have dissent? when you're dissenting against the Bush administration policies. And if I may borrow a copy of my book, it's called Dissent, Voices of Conscience. Profiles of men and women of our government and other governments, the British government, the Danish government, the Australian government, who have taken their governments to task on the war in Iraq, on eavesdropping, on torture. Men and women of civilians in those governments as well as military. Thank you. But what happens with dissent when you go to a political party's convention and you're saying, wait, we don't want to be a warmongering country. We want to have different platforms. Well, how many of you all saw what happened in St. Paul, Minnesota, when the people were out there dissenting? Well, Pat and Sandy and I were out on the support lines many nights as we were there to be there for support for the young men and women and the old men and women who had gotten arrested there, who were doing nothing more than peaceful, nonviolent protest of administration policies that will be continued by John McCain.